The crime scene prees. Julian Hart wasn't just Boston's most beloved philanthropist. He was the architect of 5 perfect disappearances, and no one saw it coming. NTS. The crime scene presents a new page of crime, a new mystery, a new shock case. Julian Hart arrived in Boston in the spring of 2003, stepping into the city's elite circles like he'd always belonged. He was tall, impeccably dressed, and spoke with a calm confidence that made people lean in. At charity galas, he was the man everyone wanted to meet. At networking events, he remembered names, birthdays, and favorite wines. He didn't just charm, he disarmed. Julian volunteered at shelters, donated to missing persons foundations, and even helped organize fundraisers for domestic abuse survivors. His social media showed him walking rescue dogs, mentoring teens, and attending art shows. He was the kind of man people trusted instantly. Women described him as gentle, thoughtful, and safe. Men called him sharp and solid. No one ever questioned his intentions. But beneath the surface, Julian was watching. He kept detailed notes on the people he met, who lived alone, who had no close family, who seemed emotionally vulnerable. He never rushed. He waited. Months could pass between first contact and his next move. He studied routines, learned habits, and built trust. His charm wasn't just natural, it was strategic. The first woman disappeared in June 2004. She had attended one of Julian's wine tastings just weeks before. Her case was filed as a missing person, with no signs of foul play. The second vanished 13 months later. Again, no connection was made. Julian continued to host events, smile for photos, and build his reputation as a man of compassion. By the time 5 women had vanished, Julian had become a fixture in Boston's philanthropic scene. He was even nominated for a local humanitarian award. No one suspected the truth, that the city's most beloved gentleman was quietly orchestrating a series of disappearances with chilling precision. This chapter sets the stage for a story not just about murder, but about manipulation, image, and the terrifying power of charm. Julian Hart wasn't hiding in the shadows. He was hiding in plain sight. The first disappearance was quiet. A 32-year-old art teacher named Elise Monroe failed to show up for work one Monday morning in June 2004. Her apartment was locked, her car untouched, and her phone left charging beside her bed. Police found no signs of struggle, no forced entry, and no motive. Her case was filed as a missing person, tragic, but not unusual. 13 months later, another woman vanished. This time, it was a freelance journalist named Dana Keller. She had recently moved to Boston and was last seen leaving a charity event hosted by Julian Hart. Again, no evidence, no suspects, no answers. Her disappearance was treated as isolated, despite eerie similarities to Elise's case. Over the next 5 years, 3 more women disappeared, each exactly 13 months apart. All were single, lived alone, and had attended one of Julian's events within weeks of vanishing. Yet no one connected the dots. Different neighborhoods, different professions, different backgrounds. The cases were scattered across precincts, handled by separate investigators, and buried under stacks of unrelated reports. Julian's name appeared in each file, but only as a host, a donor, a friendly acquaintance. He was never questioned, never suspected. His reputation as a community figure shielded him from scrutiny. He was the man who helped search for Elise. He donated to Dana's memorial fund. He even spoke at a vigil for the 3rd victim, offering comfort to grieving families. The pattern was invisible to the public. Even seasoned detectives missed it. The timing, the victim profiles, the subtle connections, they were too faint to trigger alarms. Julian had crafted a system that thrived on silence and separation. He didn't just avoid detection, he designed it. It wasn't until a fire exposed his hidden basement that the cases were revisited. Only then did investigators realize they hadn't been chasing 5 separate mysteries. They had been circling one man all along. In the summer of 2008, a fire broke out in Julian Hart's historic townhouse in Beacon Hill. It started in the kitchen, likely from faulty wiring, and was quickly contained. But during the inspection, firefighters noticed something strange. A section of the basement wall sounded hollow when tapped. Further investigation revealed a hidden door, seamlessly blended into the masonry. Behind it lay a room no one was meant to find. The space was cold, windowless, and meticulously organized. Shelves lined the walls, each labeled with a woman's name. On them sat personal items: a silver locket, a handwritten journal, a pair of ballet slippers. These weren't random keepsakes. They were deeply intimate, clearly belonging to the 5 women who had vanished over the past 5 years. Some items had never been reported missing. Others had been dismissed as irrelevant. Now, they told a different story. In the center of the room stood a vintage display case, like something from a museum. Inside were photographs, some candid, some posed, of the victims. Each image was framed, dated, and arranged chronologically. Investigators were stunned by the level of detail. Julian hadn't just taken souvenirs. He had curated a collection. Every item was preserved, cataloged, and displayed with obsessive care. There were no signs of violence in the room. No blood, no weapons, no forensic chaos. It was eerily clean, almost reverent. Experts later described it as a psychological shrine, a place where Julian could relive his control over each victim without ever being caught. The room wasn't about murder. It was about memory, dominance, and ritual. The discovery shifted the investigation overnight. What had been 5 unrelated missing persons cases now pointed to a single suspect. Julian Hart, the city's beloved philanthropist, was suddenly at the center of a chilling pattern. And the most disturbing part? He hadn't tried to destroy the evidence. He had preserved it, like art. As investigators dug deeper into Julian Hart's past, they realized his crimes weren't driven by rage or impulse. They were calculated acts of psychological domination. Julian didn't kill to silence or erase. He killed to control. Every move was deliberate, every victim selected with care. He didn't choose strangers. He chose women who had, in some way, denied him emotional access. Forensic psychologists began to piece together a chilling behavioral profile. Julian was not a sadist. He didn't torture or mutilate. Instead, he orchestrated disappearances that left no trace, no trauma, no chaos. His victims simply vanished. That silence was part of the design. It gave him power, not just over the women, but over the narrative itself. What triggered Julian's actions wasn't rejection in the traditional sense. It was subtle, a missed call, a polite decline to meet again, a shift in tone. These moments, insignificant to most, were perceived by Julian as personal betrayals. He believed he was owed affection, attention, and emotional compliance. When denied, he didn't lash out. He planned. Experts noted that Julian's charm wasn't a mask, it was a tool. He used it to build trust, to lower defenses, to create emotional dependency. His victims often described feeling seen and understood by him. That illusion of safety made his control even more complete. By the time he acted, they were already isolated, emotionally, socially, and psychologically. One chilling detail emerged from his journals, recovered from the hidden basement. He referred to his victims not by name, but by archetype: the skeptic, the romantic, the wanderer. Each entry detailed how he studied their personalities, predicted their reactions, and manipulated their choices. It wasn't just murder, it was a psychological experiment. Julian Hart didn't crave blood. He craved obedience. His crimes were not expressions of violence, but of ego. In 2013, 5 years after Julian Hart's arrest, a cold case unit in Vermont reopened the file of a missing woman named Lila Hartley. She had vanished in 1999, 4 years before Julian's known timeline began. Her case had gone cold quickly. No suspects, no leads, just a single item left behind: a hairbrush found at her sister's house. At the time, DNA testing was limited, but with new technology, investigators ran the sample again. What they found changed everything. The strand of hair didn't belong to Lila, it matched Julian Hart. But Lila had never been listed among his known victims. She wasn't part of the 5. She had disappeared before Julian became Julian Hart. Digging deeper, investigators uncovered a buried family connection. Lila Hartley was Julian's half-sister. They had grown up in separate households and rarely saw each other. But records showed they had met just weeks before her disappearance. No one had ever linked them. Her case had been filed under her mother's surname. Julian had already changed his name by then. This revelation shattered the timeline. Julian's killing spree hadn't started in 2004. It had likely begun in 1999 with someone he knew intimately. Lila's disappearance had never been tied to foul play, but now, with DNA evidence and a hidden family link, she became the first known victim. The implications were chilling. If Julian had started with his own sister, what did that say about his psychological state? Was she the trigger? The prototype? The emotional fracture that shaped everything that followed? Investigators began to suspect that Julian's obsession with control may have started as a response to unresolved family trauma. Lila wasn't just a victim, she was the origin point, and her case, buried for over a decade, had quietly held the key to understanding Julian's entire pathology. This chapter didn't just expand the timeline, it rewrote the story. Julian Hart hadn't emerged from nowhere. Julian Hart's arrest sent shockwaves through the nation. The man once hailed as a humanitarian was now accused of orchestrating a series of calculated murders. News outlets flooded the airwaves with images of Julian in handcuffs, still dressed in a crisp suit, still smiling. The contrast was unsettling. He didn't look like a killer. He looked like a man attending a business meeting. The trial began in early 2009 and quickly became a media spectacle. Cameras lined the courthouse steps. True crime podcasts dissected every detail. Social media erupted with theories, debates, and even fan pages. Julian's composed demeanor only fueled the frenzy. He complimented the prosecutor's tie, nodded politely to the jury, and took notes with quiet precision. His charm hadn't faded. It had simply changed stages. The prosecution presented overwhelming evidence. The hidden basement, the personal items, the journals, and the DNA link to his half-sister. But Julian's defense team leaned into ambiguity. They argued that the items were collected out of obsession, not violence. That no bodies had been found. That the evidence was circumstantial. The courtroom became a psychological battleground. Jurors were visibly shaken. Some admitted they found Julian likable, even sympathetic. His calm presence clashed with the horror of the accusations. One juror later confessed that she had trouble sleeping, not because of the crimes, but because she couldn't reconcile the man in front of her with the monster described in court. After 11 weeks, the verdict came in. Julian was convicted of 3 murders. 2 cases were dismissed due to lack of physical evidence. The rest remained officially unsolved. The outcome divided the public. Some saw justice, others saw failure. But everyone agreed on one thing. Julian Hart had manipulated not just his victims, but the system itself. The trial didn't just expose a killer. Julian Hart died in prison in 2021, reportedly from a stroke while reading in his cell. The news made headlines for a day, then faded. But for those who had followed his case, the story wasn't over. Rumors began to circulate. Whispers of a sealed letter, written by Julian weeks before his death, allegedly confessing to 12 additional murders. The letter was never released. Its existence was never confirmed. But the myth took hold. Podcasts speculated on its contents. YouTube channels recreated the alleged victims. Reddit threads mapped out possible timelines. Julian's story became digital folklore, a blend of fact, fiction, and fascination. Some called him a monster. Others saw him as a misunderstood genius. A few even questioned whether he had committed the crimes at all, suggesting he had been framed by a system eager to close cold cases. The fascination wasn't just about the murders. It was about the manipulation. Julian had fooled everyone: his victims, the public, the media, even the jury. He had weaponized charm, turning it into camouflage. And in doing so, he exposed something uncomfortable: how easily people believe what they want to see. His townhouse was eventually sold, but the basement was sealed permanently. The new owners refused interviews. The neighborhood moved on, but the legend lingered. Tourists still walk past the house, pointing at the windows, wondering what secrets remain inside. Julian Hart didn't leave behind a legacy of violence. He left behind a legacy of doubt. His crimes were never fully proven. His motives were never fully understood. And his final words, if they exist, remain locked away. In the end, Julian became more than a killer. He became a symbol of how image can overpower truth, how charm can silence suspicion, and how the most dangerous predators aren't the ones who hide in shadows. They're the ones who smile in the light.